Kara has just turned 18 years old. Her parents often go abroad, so she lives alone in a big house, but her passion for literature makes her time interesting. She dreams of becoming a famous writer, and something important is about to happen in her life today. She hopes to meet a writer as talented as herself, a teacher named Jonathan. Jonathan has found inspiration in this small town. Kara always arrives to class first, which amazes Jonathan. He asks where she lives, and they begin to swap stories from their lives. Jonathan is impressed that Kara has read the entire syllabus, and she jokingly remarks that she likes more serious works. Later, Winnie enters the room to take Kara away for a private conversation. While they are gone, Jonathan looks through Kara's books, and his attention is caught by one of the books with an unusual plot. Boris distracts Jonathan and hints that Jonathan is reading Kara's book, as its plot is quite provocative. Kara is also fascinated by books written by Jonathan himself. He lives with his wife Beatrice, who is also a writer. Jonathan tells her that his student Kara is reading his books, and they begin to dance, but their conversation is interrupted by a phone call from Emmy. The next day, the teachers are relaxing, sitting on a bench and enjoying a cup of coffee. Boris wonders if the forest is haunted. Suddenly, Kara appears from the forest and approaches the teachers. Boris offers her a cookie, and Jonathan can't take his eyes off her. Later, Winnie tries to get Boris's attention by admitting that she is interested in their conversation. Kara calls her a little weird. The girlfriends get together. Kara confesses that she's having trouble finding a topic for a future book. Winnie suggests reliving a moment that might help with the writing. For example, the intrigue with the teacher. The problem is that they all haven't had a serious relationship. Winnie wants her first date to be with Boris. Kara is also starting to realize that Mr. Jonathan is looking at her in some special way, but she denies it for now and spends all day reading Jonathan's book. During class, their gazes can't tear themselves away from each other. Jonathan asks Kara to come over to his house after class, and she feels a strong urge to get his attention. Later, Jonathan suggests they have a little dance, but their conversation is interrupted by Kara. She promises to keep his hobbies a secret. Jonathan suggests they go to a poetry class, hoping it will surprise them. He reads her latest work and admires it. Kara feels embarrassed, but explains what her piece was about. Jonathan suggests that she write a story in the style of his favorite author, to which Kara agrees, claiming to have read his book in its entirety and even repeats some of the phrases she particularly liked. Jonathan is left a bit dumbfounded and can't immediately respond. Kara, to help defuse the situation, apologizes, at which time Winnie enters the office and the conversation ends. Today, the teachers and Beatrice decide to visit a cafe. There they notice Winnie working there. Boris teases Winnie, and Beatrice asks a question about how beautiful the girl who read Jonathan's book is. He replies that she is very smart and unique. Beatrice states that Jonathan is no longer a writer, as he has not written another new book since becoming a teacher. The next day, Kara attends the writer's circle, feeling that this day will be special for her. Jonathan is excited to see her there. During the circle, a boy comes on stage and reads his work. Jonathan listens to him intently while Kara only has eyes for Jonathan. The next day, Kara brings coffee to the teachers. Boris shares his cookies with her. Kara wonders why Boris's cookies taste so good, but decides not to share this information with anyone. She thinks he could sell it, and Winnie could create a logo for it. That afternoon, the girls decide to visit Jonathan. He tells them that he is going on vacation with his wife. Winnie notices how nice they are to each other. When the teachers leave, Winnie suggests that Kara initiate an affair with Jonathan. Their conversation is interrupted by Boris, who suddenly decides to start selling his cookies. Vinny quickly joins his idea and asks for his phone number. Thus, Kara calls Jonathan that afternoon. He promises that he will stop by to see her before he leaves. Kara reflects that true love is quiet and unnoticeable. A few hours later, Jonathan arrives at her place. She walks out of the house in a white dress, and Jonathan stands and watches her walk toward him. Kara stops and invites him to come over to her. Jonathan stays put, however, and eventually Kara makes the first move and kisses him. After that, he keeps getting messages from her, which annoys Beatrice and causes Jonathan to retreat to the barn. There he starts reading Kara's new book and becomes involved in its plot. He imagines that the main characters are themselves. Unable to contain himself, he begins to strangle his one-eyed snake. The next day, Kara notices Jonathan's strange behavior and asks what's wrong with him. He replies that she needs to pick a new author. She tells him that he asked her to write a book about a subject she knows. Jonathan asks her if that's true. Kara claims that it is both of them. Seeing him at a loss, Kara says their story is about two similar people rejecting social constraints. Jonathan still thinks the subject matter is too adult for the book. Kara is convinced he's too scared, but they're no strangers to each other now. Jonathan tries to explain that she is his student and he is her teacher. Kara still wants recognition that her work is good, even though Jonathan doesn't want to admit it. She calls him overly cautious, but without ambition, and walks away, leaving her story in the administration box. Later that evening, the girlfriends meet up. Winnie asks if Kara likes Jonathan. Kara calls him a soci-imitation, but still likes him. At this time, Beatrice discovers that Jonathan's student wrote the story, but he refuses to tell her who the story was written about. Beatrice talks him into it, and they share the works after all. Kara suggests that Winnie write to Boris, and she agrees. Boris comes to visit Jonathan's family, and Beatrice notices him texting with someone, but he doesn't reveal who. The conversation then begins to turn to another topic, and Boris puts his phone away. It is then that Jonathan gets a call from the administration accusing him of having an inappropriate relationship with Kara, but he denies it all. He realizes that if she manages to prove that there was something more between them, he will lose his job. Beatrice says he could lose more than just his job and asks him to tell the truth. Jonathan swears there was nothing wrong between them. The next day, Kara skips class. Winnie looks confused and tries to make Jonathan feel guilty, but he remains cold. Later, Kara goes to the principal and describes everything that happened. Jonathan has to make excuses, but is lucky that their stories match. When asked a final question, Kara replies that it wasn't as bad as she thought it was. Obviously, Jonathan doesn't know what she answered, and it confuses him. During the changeover, Boris realizes that Jonathan is in love with Kara, but doesn't see boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. That is why he finds himself in this situation. Upon returning home already, Beatrice starts asking him questions. Jonathan can't deny that a spark has run between them. This becomes the last straw, and Beatrice decides to file for divorce. Winnie comes to Kara and asks her not to take revenge on Jonathan, just because he rejected her. She says that she shouldn't hurt him. Winnie defends Jonathan and calls Kara a liar. Kara quickly counters that Winnie can't do that since she has dirt on her and Boris. As Kara finishes writing a book about herself and Jonathan, the story comes to a close. Thank you for watching. You have been on the Rome Recap channel.